Welcome everyone to the Homeschooling Global Summit. We have a wonderful panel discussion today about differences in education between Europe, America, and Asia. I have three distinguished guests with me. We have Martina Geromin, who's based in Switzerland. She's been working in education and personal development topics for more than 30 years. She's worked as a teacher, university lecturer, trainer, adult educator, and an executive in international education institutions. She holds a doctorate of philosophy, a doctorate in business administration and higher education management, and a master's in giftedness. She is the CEO and co-founder at School Beyond Limitations. Welcome, Martina.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you very much.
And we have Ken Danford, who is based in the US. He's an experienced educator, unschooling advocate, self-directed learning consultant, and the co-founder and executive director at North Star, self-directed learning for teens in Sutherland, Massachusetts, correct? He's also the board member of Liberated Learners. He's also the author of the book, Learning is Natural, School is Optional, the North Star approach to offering teens a head start in life. He's been working intensively with teenagers and their families since 1991. Ken holds degrees from Amherst College and Brown University. Welcome, Ken.
Oh, true. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And finally, last but not least, we have Tim Chen, who is a founder of Taiwan Homeschool Advocates. He and his Polish wife, Dorota, have been homeschooling their three children for nearly 2 decades. They are frequent speakers at events and in the media in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China to share about their experiences of homeschooling multicultural and multilingual children. They've also co-authored a book titled, My Home is an International School, Raising Global Kids. Under Tim's advocacy, homeschool laws in Taiwan have expanded from just 1 to 3 dedicated laws, plus 20 other amendments to other relevant laws. So welcome, Tim.
Hello, thank you very much, Liz. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have us all from 4 different parts of the world. I'm American, currently in Mexico, so this is fantastic to cross all the different time zones. As some of you may know, I admin a Facebook group called Homeschooling Global Society, which is the community that we had from the summit. So we had lots of questions. People are very eager to see this talk. And, obviously we know with the pandemic, the school systems around the world are in flux and they are panicking. Some are doing better than others. So I wanted to maybe start by asking each of you how your part of the world is handling the school closures, both with the traditional school system, the alternative school systems, and the homeschoolers. What have you heard? Martina, do you want to go first?
Yes, fine, of course. Well, I think Europe is a very unique place to be in because we are, historically speaking, probably still in a situation where we need to say that standardized and traditional school is in the forefront, right? You can look at many different countries and people actually haven't changed the education system at all. It's still very similar to how it was 8 years ago, especially in certain countries such as Germany, for sure, such as somehow Switzerland as well. And many countries haven't been prepared for this pandemic to happen. And what has currently happened, so to say, is that school just closed up. Initially, nothing happened, so students stayed at home, and teachers and schools only had the idea for a number of weeks to send assignments home via email. And suddenly, from one day to the next day, students and families needed to cope with this situation and needed to actually do their self-directed work suddenly by themselves without having been doing it so far. So it's been a little bit a huge confusion, and only slowly but surely, I think there is the tendency also among, traditional schools and state schools to think in terms something may have to change. But we are not completely there yet. So there's still a lot of resistance. Teachers are not ready, families are not ready. And there is the call for change, but only, maybe a few countries are a little bit faster over others. And we may come back to that maybe later, but it's still a lot of confusion with regards also to sitting exams. You know, each country does approaches it differently. The EU is actually only in a situation where they can recommend things to happen, but they don't have the power to make any changes or to invite countries to make changes. And on top of that, we also have the situation that among countries, there are a lot of differences. Like in Germany, you know, the Bundesländer, the little countries in the country have their own authorities and their own ways on how to bring forward education. And the same is applying to, for instance, Switzerland as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Martina. Ken, do you want to answer that question? How is the US and possibly Canada, if you're familiar, how are they coping with the school shutdown? How are the alternative schools like yours or the homeschoolers, how are they coping with this?
Sure. Let me talk about schools in general first. I'll talk about homeschoolers in a second. Schools generally have gone to online learning, Zoom, other ways of doing assignments of school at home, assignments by the schools that kids are supposed to do, and it is driving everybody crazy. Nobody likes it. And I wrote a column that said, no, everyone is not homeschooling. What we're doing now is not homeschooling. This is schooling at its worst. It's just assignments and theoretically grades and deadlines with no camaraderie among kids, with no camaraderie or good moments among adults and kids, you know, with teachers. And it's just arbitrary assignments with no after school extracurricular activities or anything. This is just the worst of the worst. Everybody hates it. I don't want the word homeschooling associated with what's happening now because it's going to set us all back. And I think it's showing people how much they rely on schools, how much, you know, kids would rather be at school than at home with their parents doing this nonsense. But we'll see what happens down the road. And I think homeschoolers are more or less in the same boat. They're cut off from all of their group activities, from going out in the world, from, you know, being with other homeschooling co-op mates, and it stinks for them too. This is terrible for everybody. No one's having fun. I mean, there's a handful of introverts who are glad to be at home, left alone with no responsibilities to go out, but you know, that's a small subset of humanity, I think. So as soon as this can be over, we'll see what happens. There will be some people who won't want to go back to school because they don't feel safe, and they may stick with homeschooling. But the first task for us will be to educate them that what we just have been going through is not really homeschooling. There's a different way to really do this process, and we'd like to help you if that's what you want to do. But otherwise, it's just kind of a grim thing here. Ironically enough, one last thing here is that public schools have their hands tied about failing kids. Public schools by law, you know, with special needs and various technology issues and so on, can't assume that all the kids are going to do the work, and they can't necessarily threaten to fail kids who don't do it. So public school kids can shrug this kind of junk off and just have fight with their parents about how much time they're doing or not doing this online nonsense. But the private schools aren't bound by that. And so if you're a family that has been using private school, you're kind of sunk. Because if your kid doesn't do all the computer work, your kid will fail the year, and their private school has the authority to do that to them. So it's ironically much more stressful for private school kids than public school kids, who can basically do it or not and muddle through, and they'll be fine.
Right, yeah, there's an issue in Seattle where I'm from, where a lot of the schools, there was inequity, where not all the kids at home had computers or even
Right.
you know, tablets or anything to do their schoolwork. So then some of those districts canceled this online COVID school completely. So nobody's getting anything.
Right. Or there's one computer for 4 kids, but you know, there's all kinds of issues.
Right, right.
Right.
Okay, so Tim, let us know how things are going in Asia. I mean, it's a big place, it's varied. So how are families in Asia handling the school shutdown? I mean, it started in China. So we've seen kind of the news reports that schools are starting to open up and they have to do social distancing and all that. But how have they handled this over the last several months?
Okay, you've probably seen some of the internet pictures and YouTubes about kids wearing stuff over their head and keeping social distance and all that. But that's a very recent thing. First of all, of course, the virus started out in China, in Wuhan, so they shut down very early on, back in January 20th, and then and everywhere else in Asia responded very quickly. So, like in Taiwan, it happens that we have a winter break until February 10. That's because of the Chinese New Year, and so the school in Taiwan decided to postpone the opening by 2 weeks, and we used that 2 weeks to do the following things. We basically prepare the school with like thermometers, masks, and disinfectants and everything, and figure out how students should line up and to have a check every morning. So by February 24th, when the school reopens, 2 weeks later than scheduled, all the kids just went back and normally, but then they have a very rigid temperature checking every day, and also keep washing their hands and wearing masks all the time. But we're still hit by imported cases that people travel from China, Europe, and US by March, when US started and Europe starting to getting a lot of cases. So one of the public high school was shut down for 2 weeks only because they had 2 cases in the school. And that was the only shutdown we had throughout the whole pandemic. And now Taiwan has no cases for the past 30 days, locally transmitted case, and only like 1 or 2 sporadically imported cases. And other places like Japan, Japan was going through similar situation whereby they shut the school down and then they reopen again and then they shut it down. But they don't shut down completely because they want to keep the economy going as well. So they will do slowing down the classes, i.e. to have half of the students to come half of the time. So that way they can lower the density and keep the social distance as well. And so many other, and also, but like in China and Korea, where a massive online learning was rolled out overnight, they just did it. And of course, there's similar situation that Ken was talking about and Liz was talking about, the equity issues. But in Taiwan, there's interesting stories that we prepared for this, but we never need it because our school never shut down. But our government was very cautious about using the software that we are using right now, Zoom, and because of the security risks involved. So back in February, when after the teachers and everything, they prepared for the whole month from January to February to get ready for the online class, and the government decided we cannot use Zoom at all for the whole country. Yeah, and so that was a big blow to many teachers that they have spent it all the time preparing their online classes. But fortunately, we never need to use it. But in that way, we kind of we lack the experience like Korea and China that have went massively online. And as far as the homeschooler and alternative school goes, the biggest impact, of course, is that we cannot meet up. And as a homeschooler, we like to do that a lot. And so, although the museum, everything is opened, but there are so much restrictions, and we just couldn't be bothered to meet. But we also move our meetup to online, and the interesting result of that is we end up having a groups of parents and kids mingle together from different cities, because the meetup used to be very regional, but now it's online, so we can have parents and kids come from all over the country to meet up online. So that was the a surprise outcome of the virus.
Yeah, you get to meet more people from outside your area. That's awesome.
That's right.
So do you think that this situation is going to cause or help education reform in your area? And, yes or no, and what are the cultural obstacles for reforming education? Who wants to go first on that? Martina, should we just do it that way?
Sure.
Fine, yes. Well, I think there's more and more the call coming also from parents that something has to change, because they are in a situation, they find themselves also in a situation, by listening now to Tim, it's just amazing to see how different it is in Europe. There are countries where the school will never open until September. So in Italy, for instance, the school have closed, if I'm not mistaken, halfway through March, and they haven't opened anymore. And they will not open until September. And they still think in terms of what exactly will they be doing as from September onwards. So there are ideas of actually also sizing down the numbers of the classes, because as far up to now, the size of the classes has been quite big, right? So between 24 and 30 kids, right? Whether this is high school or whether this is middle school or even primary school. And now they are talking in terms of we need to resize these numbers, because we are just not capable in terms of social distancing and stuff like that. So this is certainly a discussion that is taking place also with people who have the authority to make changes. A lot of discussions take place, and I see that there is the tendency of looking at education anew somehow, right? Anew, because also educators who work in the traditional system, they realize with regards to, let's say, also assessment writing, right? We are also now in a phase of how do we assess the students? Up to now, they always have to take the final year exams or, the final cycle exams, I don't know how they are called in America, but here it's maturità or matura or abitur or A-level, so different at the end of secondary school, right? Everyone has to undertake those exams, and all the different countries again have taken different have found out or have undertaken different solutions, such as some are doing only oral exams like in Italy. Others have completely abolished, so to say, the official exam, and now look at assessment not only from a one-off moment assessment at the end of the school year, but they look at the entire performance of the students, along what they have, so to say, been able to go through the entire school year. So they are looking really at what their progress was by looking at student work throughout the school year, by looking at their engagement, by looking at what they bring to the table, initiative, and so forth. And I think it is for sure a great moment to for change really to happen. And at the other side, we see also parents who now try to put a lot of pressure towards those who take such decisions, because they are now meeting together. They are really kind of saying it hasn't worked anymore so far. So you need to go in a direction where the students really gets in the center of the attention. It's not his or her performance only at the end of the school year, but it's his or her well-being. So it's more this kind of Finnish approach, as you said at the beginning, the well-being, right? Which kind of values are in the forefront? Is it a competition? Is it a competition against and the performance with regards to the society, what the society, the so-called society is looking for? Or is it rather the approach towards how how can I help this person, this human being, to really flourish in such a way that this person brings the best benefit to him, herself, and then, of course, accordingly also to society as a whole. Mm-hmm. So I really believe it will probably be not a sudden change, but something is going on, right? One can tell something is going on. How fast it will go, I don't know.
Okay, excellent. And Ken, what about the American and Canadian school system?
Well, yeah, I'll balance Martina's optimism with some pessimism for you. I think that people are eager to get back to normal. We have our governor in Massachusetts who was flirting with the idea in early May of bringing kids back to school just for the purpose of testing them so that we could quantify just how much they haven't learned this spring. That was taken as a serious idea and squashed only because, you know, bringing them back wasn't safe, but the premise was accepted. I don't think that this is an impetus to change anything from the top down. And it's reinforcing the notion that people really rely on schools, not just for learning, but for childcare, for preschool activity, before school activities, after school activities, all kinds of sports and other kinds of recreation, and meals, food, you know, breakfast and lunch at schools are an important part of American culture, and the transportation system, the whole gathering, and also social work issues of other people paying attention to kids in need. So we really rely on schools a lot. And I don't think the coronavirus break is going to shift that. If anything, it's going to reinforce that. Now, that pessimism, I'm fairly confident about. I'll balance it with the optimism that from the bottom up, there will be parents who, when schools reopen, will decide not to send their kids back. And then hopefully there'll be a moment for us, people like us in our community and people watching this panel today, to share information, to say, if you're having qualms about sending your kids back to school, we can support you to use homeschooling in a legal way to avoid compulsory schooling, but in a way that's much more cheerful and delightful and interactive than what you just experienced in coronavirus. And so I think from the bottom up, there'll be a percentage of people who may choose to continue or to embark on for the first time homeschooling by the way we mean it. And I'm optimistic that will happen for some percentage of people. But I just do not believe that the coronavirus closure is going to be the impetus for any kind of school reform in the United States or Canada.
Yeah, I agree. And
sorry,
I have a group, and we've had so many parents from around the world join it. You know, from what I understand, 3% of Americans homeschool, and I'm predicting it'll get more and more and more. So
maybe, but also people are learning how much they hate the word homeschooling right now because of its misuse and misapplication. Everybody hates what's going on right now, and they don't want to do this. Yeah, they think this is homeschooling is not going to increase.
I think there's a good percentage of people, because there's been so many articles, so many Facebook groups that talk about that this is not, like the one you wrote, this is not homeschooling. Mm-hmm. And people are coming to the homeschool groups on Facebook or wherever in droves to find out how to do it properly. So that's news. Tim, let's talk about the cultural obstacles or what's happening in Asia for reforming education. Is that going to happen like it's happening in Europe, or not like it's happening in the US?
Okay. I think Taiwan got probably the best outcome in the way that we prepare for this to happen, and it didn't happen. But the whole process of preparing allow us to look at distant learning or autonomous learning, or giving students more responsibility to take care of their learning. We prepare for that. So we produce massive materials and made it online, and bought tens of thousands of tablets and get ready to deploy it. And we never need it. So in the way that education didn't suffer, so we didn't need to do what Massachusetts did, is to try to bring kids back to test them. We went ahead with the 15-year-old test, which is about 220,000 students altogether did a 15-year-old school leaving test. So, and there were no infection at all. So in the way that we kind of prepare for it and we never need it, but so from the school point of view, they don't think they need to do it this way. They think they are quite cool because they can handle the pandemic very well. But the parents were a bit scared back in February and March, and then they're thinking about what the risks of sending the kids to this very cramped environment, and also it's high pressure, and they already had enough of some of them already had enough of it, and so. We think that the long-term benefit will be a lot more material were made available free of charge. It used to be only for the school. Now it's available to everyone because of the pandemic prepared readiness effort. And also it gave the parents a way to look at the whole schooling and the education, and thinking maybe I can take it, I can take more responsibility instead of just outsource it to the school because of the risk of getting infected. Because we never had a pandemic outbreak in Taiwan, so parents are making the choice consciously. They are not pushed into it, but they were thinking. Maybe there are better ways to do it than going to school.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what's going to happen with all those study centers. Like in South Korea, a lot of the kids, high school kids, after school go to these study centers until 11 o'clock at night. So it's their whole day is typically, rigorous learning. So, that whole thing, is that going to change? Because again, the kids are not just with each other during the typical school day, but after school as well.
Right.
Are people changing their minds about that? Like, is it necessary to have that much, memorization, extra tutoring?
It depends on, because if the college entrance exam is still very much a drill based, and it rewards people who can memorize facts rather than being able to analyze and be critical about the question. Then this kind of service will always have its places, and but we look at Taiwan. What happened in Taiwan is that there's been a shift for the past maybe 10 years due to the decline of population. The cram schools are becoming smaller in terms of the class size, and to a point that there are many cram schools now offers a class of 1, so only one student. But then, of course, it doesn't have the scale economy. It cannot function properly. So what they do is that they will make the lectures available on video, but the class of 1 will simply answering the questions. And so that student will make appointments, like going to see a consultant. And then, so you still go to cram school after school, but you spend some of the time watching video instead of cram into a very large room of like hundreds of students in a tiny weeny space.
Well, that sounds exciting. Not. Okay, so now Martina, why don't I ask you about the homeschooling situation in Europe, or the alternative school situation. You can also touch to online learning because you've launched a school. So what is the situation in Europe? And obviously it's very different by country, but can you talk about what is available pre-pandemic, in this alternative education world, and what do you think will happen in the future?
Well, with regards to homeschooling, certainly it's got a completely different situation from other parts of the world where homeschooling has been nearly not a tradition, but like in the US, right? It started really well. And as you said before, it's 3% now of people who have decided to actually go in that direction. Well, homeschooling is not necessarily something that parents take into consideration at a large scale. It's very, very, very exceptions, let's put it that way. And it's mainly people who have decided to more or less to travel the world who actually go in that direction. And homeschooling in certain countries is not even allowed, right? You mentioned that before. There are some countries, and certainly Germany and Denmark and parts of Switzerland, where homeschooling is not an option. It's mandatory for parents to send their children to school. So if they don't want to send them to school, they really encounter a number of problems, and they have to leave their countries in order to do that, as for now, unless there are specific problems, let's say with regards of health situation, right? Then of course it's a different pair of shoes, and also in such cases in those countries there are exceptions. I think maybe this situation has also opened a little bit the eyes to parents. And as Ken said before, some parents are shattered due to homeschooling because they see homeschooling as something completely different. And I'm not coming from the homeschooling field either, but I know the homeschooling field quite well. And homeschooling, what people understand under homeschooling in Europe is not necessarily the same what families know about homeschooling in the States, for instance. And however, they have come and parents see, if they have children at home, like now during this period, that is a bigger burden on them, right? Because it's actually just handing out, as we said before, assignments, and it's then the parents taking care of that, and also the students who don't know how to deal with it because they haven't learned it. So what is the future of homeschooling? First of all, I think I would like to emphasize that it's good to know that homeschooling is possible in many countries in Europe, but it's not easy because still you have to adhere to certain requirements, and each country has different requirements. Certain countries they expect the students to undergo an end of year exam. Other countries expect the homeschoolers to collaborate with the local school system, right? So that the syllabus, so to say, is covered. And that's the current situation. If you are asking what the future may be, I am still an optimist, right? And I think the discussion is taking place, and I really do hope that this is not just, a short historical episode in our lives, but that this really starts to initiate real change. And I'm a firm believer. I think that this starts slowly but surely, and that, as I said before, parents, they are becoming more aware about it. And parents are looking for something else. They are not necessarily looking, not all the parents, of course, but those parents who are putting a lot of emphasis on education, on, the future of their children. They really want to go a different direction, and they start to gather together and to really put pressure on governments and so forth. The only problem, honestly speaking, and I had a long conversation with the head of the education department at European level, who really are open when you talk to them, and they see the value of alternative education, but they can't force any change onto the different countries, because all the countries, as we said before, are running their systems differently. But however, we are now as kind of united and see how different parts of the world are dealing with this pandemic. If I'm hearing what Asia or China and Taiwan and Japan is doing, then this can also be seen and as the starting point for change to happen.
Okay, good. And a follow-up, I know that homeschooling is a little bit more active in the UK and Ireland.
Yes.
Do those countries inspire and give hope to other European countries? Because living in Latin America, it's homeschooling is growing in Mexico and other parts of South America. They look to the US for inspiration. So is that happening in Europe as well?
Well, I don't see that happen yet, but certainly those people who are open for such alternatives, they are looking to those countries where it's possible. And it's not only Ireland and Great Britain. Certainly also there is, you know, a community in France. There's a community in Portugal. There's a community in Spain. There are communities in different countries, maybe less in the Eastern European countries, less there. However, in Russia, again, there's a huge community there, right? And less in Greece, for instance. You know, I mean, we have to see it very distinguished among countries, but you're right. Those who are in favor for something, for change to happen, they are looking to those countries. But in the first place, I think still, the country people in Europe are looking at is more or less, with regards to homeschooling, is probably more the United States, and you know, because it's just more embedded in the fabrics.
Right, right. Okay, great. All right, so Ken, just give us a little lay of the land for homeschooling and alternative education in the U.S. I mean, obviously it's legal. There's state by state, there's different rules. Some states are very strict about it, others very liberal. What do you see? Do you see the growth happening, which we talked before, in the future with homeschooling and alternative education?
Yes, I think we are in an ideal situation for both homeschooling and alternative education. The only obstacles are people's understanding and trust in it. The legal mechanisms are clear and open for everybody. Not only is homeschooling legal in every state, even when you say there's some states are strict, they're not really. It's very easy to homeschool everywhere. And I believe that's true in Canada as well. There are loads of homeschooling co-ops to offer mutual support of children at young ages. There's also, you know, a whole range of alternative schools as well that are you know, student led or whatever. So the options are plenty in the United States, and there's really no limit on them if people choose to utilize them. Even more, there are clear pathways to university without a high school diploma in the United States. You don't have to go to high school. You can get a GED, which is a very simple test for state universities, or you don't even need a diploma at all for many of the private universities. And then there's community colleges that you can start at sometimes in my local one, any age. We have 13-year-olds taking college courses, you know, and getting an associate's degree by the time they're 15 or 16. And then moving right into four-year universities as juniors. The system is completely well-oiled and open for everybody who wants to do it. And the only problem is people's trust and understanding of that situation. And in fact, when you talk about legal homeschooling, the openness of the universities to admit people who homeschooled, the widespread of affordability of community college, another thing that we have in the United States that it isn't everywhere in the world are public libraries, which have tremendous resources and support for families who choose homeschooling. You combine all of these things, and it makes me really encouraged and happy. Speaking to this international global summit, I will say that normally I cringe representing the United States on a global stage. There's not very much that I'm proud of about being an American citizen, particularly right now. And so when I am forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance, or, you know, in a circumstance where I'm standing for the national anthem, I choose to think about the homeschooling openness. I choose to think about public libraries and community colleges, and the flexibility in the United States to reinvent oneself. If one didn't do well in high school, if one had a tough adolescence, it doesn't matter. There's a million ways to recover and move on with your life that are not necessarily available in Europe or in Asia, where if you don't do high school right the first time, you might be severely constrained for professional opportunities later in life. So I'm very optimistic, both about the permission of homeschooling, but the social acceptance of people who choose to use it, and the openness of every facet of life. Nobody cares. So just do it if you want to. And the more we can do to educate people that is the case, the healthier we will all be.
Yeah, and you know, things are changing. The California University system recently said that SAT tests and ACT tests are not required
Right.
to enter. So that's great news.
Yeah, and there's already been a huge trend of SAT optional college admissions as well, but this is very encouraging news. I'm glad for that, and may it continue.
Okay, great. All right, so Tim, I know that, you know, in Taiwan, you guys are kind of the forefront in homeschooling and alternative education throughout Asia, thanks to you in big part. But can you just tell me, because every country is so different in Asia in regards to homeschooling. I asked you the question why Taiwan is so progressive compared to the other countries in Asia. Can you touch on that and see if what's happening in Taiwan will spread throughout Asia?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Taiwan took a very interesting role in the way that when we started looking at homeschool regulation, of course, we look at US as a model and try to see how, you know, how wonderful it is to have a laissez-faire government, not, you know, allow parents to do whatever they want. But it's not realistic because we came from a very rigid education regime that you cannot simply ask the government not to do anything. So we kind of created a Taiwan original way of regulating and working with the government on homeschooling. So we first set out a very simple set of regulations, which is doable by the parents, achievable by the parents, and also government feels like they are in charge and dealing with it. And as we move forward from there, there's a lot of dialogue and meetings and come back and forth. And also we keep reminding the government that it's a very small population, so you don't want to over-regulate it so early. But if we see anything is going wrong, we will, you know, we'll be the first to inform you. You know, we are more concerned about ruining the homeschool environment than you are. So that way we keep going and keep working on the regulation and keep having dialogue. And so the regulations amended, fine-tuned almost every other year. And so in a way that we're moving forward, and in the past 10 years, we're moving forward at a steady pace, and but every time take a not very large leap. But over the years, we accumulate a lot of achievement. For instance, we now have a homeschool regulation from grade 1 to grade 12, and it's all recognized by the state. And those kids are not required to take the standardized test if they don't want to, but the government will still recognize their learning, and it's done by a committee of reviewers, which at least 2/5 of them are homeschool parents or homeschool group representative. So it's a collaboration between the public and private partnership. And also the high school homeschoolers, i.e. between age 15 to 18, will get a government grant to homeschool. And so we receive $2,200 US a year to homeschool in Taiwan if you are 15 to 18. And also on the college admission note, we have a separate admission program. And so if you don't want to take the Taiwan SAT, that's fine. The university will interview you and also admit you based on your what we call portfolio. So, you know, whatever you've done as a homeschooler, you can present it. And so there are many people who choose to homeschool, not only because of religious reason, but also because they're really seeking for different education, as well as foreign national who are in Taiwan but who don't want to send their kids to international school due to financial constraint or any other reasons, and they can apply for homeschooling. So Taiwan become the best place to homeschool in this part of the world is mainly largely because we work with the government and we earn the trust, and also we try to treat government mutual respect. They respect us and we respect them. And also, very important is democracy. We are a democratic society, and the government listens to what people are saying, and people voice their concern if they see something is not happening. In comparison to places like Japan, for example, there are, because in Taiwan right now it's about 8,000 homeschoolers, but in Japan there are 130,000 kids between age 1 to 9 do not attend school. And it's a very high number because Japan is it's quite a large population, of course, but still it's a relatively large number. In the way that Japan as a society has very strong conformity. So if you don't fit in to the school, you have a very miserable life, effective. So the only way is not go to school if you don't fit in. There are no other alternatives. So, but there are very little to help those who leave the school because the government don't officially recognize homeschooling. Although, if you want to go to university or college, you can still take GED and all that. But the society has a very strong bias against people who do not attend school. That's what they call them. They are non-attendees. That's what it is. And so the pressure is really coming from to fit in to the whole society and not to create a burden to the public. And so homeschooling in Japan are very much underground. They don't talk about it. They don't speak publicly, except for some Christian-based, faith-based homeschooler group, which they will probably publicly speaking because of they're doing it for the faith. But the other 130,000 kids, parents, they just simply don't talk about it. Although starting from this year, they are getting more and more, so open-minded educators, and try to encourage them to come out to talk about their experience and to create a positive spin on it. But that's still very slow coming. And then we look at China. China is a very interesting place in the way that homeschooling is technically illegal. Because there's this compulsory school attendance law. Anyone between age of 6 and 15 have to go to school. And the government has a lot of reason to impose that because they want to indoctrinate their citizens with the patriotic education and so on and so forth. However, the government, who is responsible for public education, i.e. the local government, some of them are very bankrupt in the rural area, and then they have and some of their citizens have migrated into the urban area, so they are quite happy to just let those kids disappear and not coming to school, so they can ease the burden of the public school system, which is already very difficult. And but those kids who are in the urban area, whose household is in the rural area, cannot go to the public school in the urban area because they are technically not there. They're invisible. So what you end up is having those kids who, the migrant workers from the rural area, end up having to homeschool, not by choice, but because they cannot go to school. So you have a alternative education set up for people like that in the urban area, and they'll go to school and until they are about 15, 16, 18, and then they'll return to their home county and to somehow magically get all 12 years of transcript and sit at the university entrance exam and then try to go to university. But having said that, the Chinese government has come out 2 years ago and also last year to warn people not to do that, not to have to send their kids to public school and all this privately run, unregulated study group and co-op or homeschooling is not legal. But then they cannot enforce it anyway. So people have to do whatever they have to do.
Wow, so interesting. Such a big variety of things that are going on in Asia. Okay, so I wanted to ask the three of you if you have questions for each other quickly, because we're running low out of time. But is there anything you're interested in knowing about each other and that part of the world?
Well, Tim, I'm curious what you just said about the kids who don't go to school in China or in Japan. If say it's 16 to 19 years old, they have some surge of maturity and confidence, and now they want to go to university, but they didn't go to school and they don't have a traditional high school diploma. What's the mechanism that they can use to get on with their lives at 18, 19 years old then?
Sure. In Japan, one can take GED at 15 and 16 years old. So once you pass the GED, you can sit at a college entrance exam without much of a problem.
But excuse me, you mean the GED like the American GED?
Like the American GED.
It's very simple. That's a very low level test.
Right, and of course that just give you the admission to sit in the exam. Doesn't mean you can get into the exam, because getting to the university requires a lot more. There's a standardized test, there's an interview, there's all kind of things, and of course coming from a society that is very very biased and very conformist, I should say, and if you are deviate away from norm, which is going to school, it will be looked at very differently. So the chance of people who can go straight to university, not attending schools, is very, very small. So some of the options are going to universities in the States or other part of the world where it's more open, more liberal, more tolerant towards this kind of education. And the similar situation in China is also you can sit in the exam and then go in, and there are parents who do homeschooling in China for the sole purpose of cramming their kids so that they can excel in the university entrance exam.
Sure.
And to do that, you of course first take a Chinese GED. And then once you pass that, you continue to go to take the entrance exam and then go to university.
So I'm glad to know there is a mechanism. That's very encouraging.
Yes.
And that first step is pretty low level. I mean, most kids who are literate and have some basic skills can pass the GED and then be in a position to move forward.
Yeah, but in case of Taiwan, we didn't like this solution. Part of because the GED exam has been quite outdated, and so it's very much memory driven, and you have to memorize a lot of facts, and then you just spill it out again, and yeah.
That's not the case in the United States. The GED here is almost all reading comprehension, multiple choice answer, not fact-based at all. So maybe it's a different test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Okay, wonderful. I really appreciate you all joining us and sharing your wisdom about your part of the world. Can we talk about your current projects and future projects? Martina, you want to go first and explain your wonderful online school that you've launched?
Yes, thank you, Liz. We launched 1.5 years ago School Beyond Limitations, and that's an alternative school system that allows especially people who want to be a little bit more mobile with their children to take their school with them. So we launched this school in the first place because, of course, especially in Europe, homeschooling as such, and as you understand it and as we have learned about it today, is not as a practice that is taken into consideration by many people. People are still looking for a kind of school framework, and that's why we have decided to launch School Beyond Limitations for students and families who are traveling the world, but also for families who have the need to take their children with them when they are, you know, traveling with their businesses, so or also families who are separated, so that children are in a position of saying, okay, I stay a month with my dad, I stay a month with my mother, and still I attend the same school. And what is also different about School Beyond Limitations is that it is extremely student-centered. So we really take each individual from where they are. And at the same time, they learn with others. And in our school context, the students are in multi-age groups. The size of the classes is very small, so there are not more than 8 students in one class. And as I said before, we start at the age of 10-ish, and it goes up to the end of a high school level. We also put a lot of emphasis not only on the academics, but on the entire human being. So we want them to be trained, so to say, in emotional intelligence. We want them to train them we train them in personal development, in entrepreneurial thinking, and in seeing topics interconnected, so transdisciplinary learning. And it's not based on grading as such, right? So there is a continuous ongoing assessment taking place, of course. So it's basically based on self-assessment, of course, guided assessment, group assessment, and also feedback by the teacher, but it's ongoing. And so our aim is to help the students to become extremely self-aware and self-directed learners who make conscious choices for whatever they do. They have, of course, their freedom, but there is a kind of a standard, in the sense, the framework to meet their peers on a regular basis every day. And on top of the online sessions, we call it online learning, although we could also call it distant learning or distance learning. We have, on top of that, we meet, because the social aspect is also a very important aspect for us. We meet 3-4 times a year regularly in different countries, and we do experiential learning on specific topics that are very unique for that specific country, so that the students actually learn and get, so to say, embedded in different cultures around Europe, for instance, because we are so diverse, right? Europe is actually a continent, but so diverse as such. And so they learn multicultural sensitivity, and not only by looking at others, by being embedded in this other culture, and by being exposed, so to say, to something that culture specifically has to offer. So that's our project, and it's our last year. It was just a pilot phase, and it was extremely successful due to the fact, I would say, also of this personalized approach, because on top of the personalized learning in the lessons, we also offer the mentoring. And I must say, I also got I got to know Ken, right, a few years ago, and I asked him whether I could have a look at his center, learning center, North Star Learning Center. And so I went there also to have a look at how he works, you know, physically, and how that could be translated into what we have created, we have designed. And I went away with lots of inspiration. So thank you, Ken, for this. And certainly that was key. You know, I'm also an advocate of the notion that each human being wants to learn. You know, there is no need that we have to push. We just need to help them, you know, to flourish. And That's why we created School Beyond Limitations, to give more freedom to families, and also to families to not being in a situation or needing to be in a situation of always changing schools if you change country or if you change city, that the school comes with you instead of always starting from anew again. So that's our project.
Excellent. That sounds really innovative. Wonderful. So Ken, tell us a little bit more about North Star and any other projects that you're working on.
Sure, and I'll try to keep it brief because the Homeschooling Global Summit has invited me to do a number of interviews, and I'm kind of across this medium here. So if you look at the rest of the list, you'll see me other places. My main mission is to help make homeschooling possible for any interested family, any interested teen. And it's already legal in a lot of places. Where it's not legal, I'm not actually fighting that fight in other countries, but where homeschooling is legal, it's just a fact, and it's well accepted here in the United States, and I want to help more people use it. And that's more than just telling people they can do it. Most ordinary families need a community center. They need some other adults. They need a place for their kids to go. They need other people. And so that's what North Star is. North Star was created in 1996 with a friend. It's still going. And we have been, the last 10 years, sharing our model and encouraging people elsewhere to create little community centers to support families and teens to opt out of school where they are. So these are mostly kids who are not homeschooling, who are in school and miserable, maybe only one in every family, not lifelong homeschooling families, to opt out of school using homeschooling as a mechanism and a community center as a base. Turns out it's a very good idea. The other thing that we're doing is to do it on a budget that's fairly thin with some fundraising to make it possible for any interested family. In 24 years, I have welcomed every single family that's ever approached North Star. We've turned nobody away for being low income or for being a difficult case or for not presenting well or having trouble in the former school. We have worked with every single family who's ever called North Star, and we intend to continue that process. So making homeschool possible and good and sustainable and viable and inspiring, successful for any interested family is what I'm all about. I'm doing that locally with North Star, and I'm doing that globally with Liberated Learners. We have a center in the Philippines. I'm talking to people all over the world. We have monthly webinars for free that people can sign up for at liberatedlearners.net, and just trying to share our experience of what we believe is necessary to make the homeschooling approach actually usable for any local family in your community. That's a good life. I have a book now, School Learning is Natural, School is Optional, that's featured elsewhere on this summit. You'll find it. I'm doing a lot of speaking, but that's my focus, is sharing the inspiration that is not just enough to know that homeschooling is legal. It's not just enough to have a little homeschooling co-op for your children and their friends. The goal is to offer enough support so that any other miserable child could stop going to school tomorrow.
Excellent, Ken, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and being such an advocate for so many families in our country. So that's awesome. So Tim, tell us a little bit about what you're working on. Tell us more about the Taiwan Homeschool Network, any other projects you're working on.
Okay. Right now I'm working to promote Taiwan as a homeschool destination, which may sound a bit strange. Why do you need a destination as a homeschool? Because in the region, as you are probably aware, there's been a lot of things going on right now, and many expats and family who are leaving China and trying to find another place to settle. And also for world schoolers who may want to go to a place that is more safe, more secure in terms of public health wise. So I work with the government, and we managed to get a regulation amended. So now even the smallest alternative schools, I mean those with only like a couple of kids, can admit international students. And previously it was not possible. You need to have, very high standard. You need to have a dormitory and all that. But we have amended the law so we can have host family to have kids stay with us for half a year, or 10 years if they want to do that. And so I want to make Taiwan as welcome as possible. There are 220 alternative schools of various sizes, from maybe only 15, 20 students to up to like hundreds of them. And they teach in all different ways of manners, and then I want to promote that. And so I'm very happy to hear Martina has this wonderful idea of internationalized education, and I welcome anybody who would like to come to Taiwan to set up a chapter, and can already do in the Philippines, and perhaps you'll think about coming to Taiwan as well. So everyone who is on this call, please consider Taiwan, and please give me a call.
I would love to.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate your time to share with us your wisdom and knowledge and inspiration. We will list a lot of your projects somewhere in the comments here. So everyone watching, please check them out. These three people are some of the top leaders in the world on homeschooling and alternative education. So thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Tim.